We love Andy Burnham. You'll see that all over the mainstream media. The new Prime Minister getting hailed as the King of the North now becomes the President of Peace, Hope, tax cuts and everything else. But to what extent is the mainstream media simply colluding with the mainstream uni party, that's Labour, Liberal Democrat and Conservatives, to try to tell you that you've never had it so good? Welcome to Lembit Live.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. Boring. Boring.
You gotta work. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember what you're doing. You're in no position to dictate what we're gonna feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome once again to another edition of Lembit Live here on @Unprecedented TV, where we find the facts, kill the spin, and tell it like it is from stories all around the world. Well, you would have had to be living with no media whatever to have failed to notice the adulation that the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, is getting in the mainstream media. Apparently, he is the saint from the north who's going to fix everything. He's going to sort out tax. He's going to improve the economy, maybe our international relationship with other countries too. But to what extent can Andy Burnham actually undo the kind of damage that we've seen from Keir Starmer and what I would consider to be his disastrous reign as Prime Minister? Joining me now, somebody who really would be a great Prime Minister, is Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, never knowingly undersold, bought off, or bribed. Marcus, would you take the job if it was given to you?
Good morning, Lembit. Absolutely not, because
Why not?
I'm my own person and I will never be a puppet for anyone.
But, well, actually, I'm amazed that you said no, because you'd be a very good Prime Minister for those very reasons.
In a country which is truly a democracy, my answer would have been different. But in the context of Britain, why would I want to serve the ruling elite? Because by now, most people, I think it's fair to say, are aware that the Prime Minister is not in charge of the United Kingdom.
Well, okay. We'll talk about Andy Burnham in a minute, but here's your chance to explain why, if you were elected Prime Minister, you wouldn't be able to express your free will and implement your policies. What would hold you back?
Oh, I would be able to express my opinions, but the question is, how long would I remain in the job for? The problem is that there is a shadow government or a deep state or an establishment or what I call the ruling elite. So someone will never end up in 10 Downing Street if they have certain opinions. For example, if they oppose a cashless society, if they oppose support to Israel, if they oppose support to Ukraine, if they oppose immigration and multiculturalism. Those are just some of the subject areas which would result in someone not even becoming a member of the opposition on the shadow in the shadow cabinet, on the opposition benches, let alone becoming part of government or, of course, Prime Minister. So that's something that we should be very clear of. And indeed, people of older generations are now concluding that Britain is not a democracy. In one of her last interviews, Anne Widdecombe acknowledged that there is an establishment in Britain. And she added that that is something that she once did not believe. So someone of her generation to say that is very significant. And it's significant because partly it is so obvious. The ruling elite is not even pretending that the government, that the Prime Minister is in charge any longer.
But then Anne Widdecombe, and it's a tragedy what happened to her. I do hope we get justice instead of some kind of a cover-up. But Anne Widdecombe herself wasn't really bought. She proves that you can get people like her who served as a minister, which I never did in an official sense. Unofficially, I guess I did, but not officially. But somebody like her who gets to ministerial level continues to think for herself. If Anne Widdecombe could do it, why can't Andy Burnham?
Absolutely, I agree. But I'm talking about the here and now. Britain in 2026 is a very different Britain to the Britain of, say, 1996, when Anne Widdecombe was in government. So whilst I have always said that Britain has never been a true democracy, it is certainly the case that 30 years ago, for example, there were strong elements of democracy in existence in Britain. But following 1997, after Blair became Prime Minister, something changed in Britain, something so sinister that very few Britons, indeed very few people in the world, would have believed that such changes could have occurred in Britain. Now, I'm not saying that all that we see happening is a result of Blair. That is certainly not the case. Blair could never have done it if the ruling elite in Britain was not in power, if it did not exist. The ruling elite has always been there. So what has happened is that the ruling elite have developed an agenda, and it is a very callous agenda. And Blair was absolutely instrumental in commencing with this agenda. So yes, once, of course, you had the likes of Anne Widdecombe in government. But the question is this: why is it today in 2026 you do not have anyone on the government benches or on the opposition benches opposing, for example, Israel, opposing the lockdowns, opposing the what is called COVID-19 vaccines, opposing LGBTQ, opposing immigration, opposing multiculturalism, calling for each and every illegal immigrant to be arrested, detained, and deported? Why is it you don't have anyone on the government or opposition benches saying that? The answer is quite simple, that the elements that Britain, the democratic elements that Britain once had, have been almost entirely done away with now.
Let's have a look at some of the things that the mainstream media are saying here. The BBC. Burnham announces 20% cut in business rates to pubs, clubs and live music venues in England. A whole lot of praise for that, and I think there are some other ones as well. There's a big debate, fairly neutral, who's in Andy Burnham's cabinet. Prime Minister Andy Burnham has announced his new cabinet after taking office following the resignation of Sir Keir Starmer. By and large, the reportage is actually quite positive in the media. Why do you think? I kind of know the answer to this myself, or at least I believe I do. Why do you think the mainstream media, including the BBC, has taken what looks like a very positive line on Andy Burnham?
The establishment, or the deep state, or the ruling elite, or however you wish to describe the actual structure of power in the United Kingdom, is very aware that vast numbers of Britons have woken up to the reality that they are being ruled by forces which hate them. And as a consequence, those Britons are very, very angry. Now, as a result of that, the ruling elite has chosen someone whom they believe can appease those Britons, who can calm down those Britons. Andy Burnham is most unremarkable. He is devoid of intelligence, of energy, and of charisma. But the ruling elite feel that because he has a, quote, nice face, a pleasant face, he is the man that can continue the nefarious agenda whilst at the same time calming down, appeasing vast numbers of Britons. So the ruling elite, through Burnham, will attempt to appease Britons by offering them certain things. For example, by saying that digital IDs will be scrapped, bus fares will be reduced, and so on and so on. The reality, of course, is that the agenda remains entrenched. The ruling elite will continue with this agenda. Burnham will not be scrapping digital ID. He can say that he's going to reduce bus fares by whatever it is, 10 pence or 14 pence. That means nothing, because if he really wanted to save the British taxpayer money, then he would end illegal immigration. He would arrest each and every illegal immigrant and deport them, and thereby save the British taxpayer billions upon billions of pounds year in, year out. But of course, he won't do that. And as for mainstream media, why are they enthusiastic about Burnham? Why are they referring to him as almost a savior? Because mainstream media is neither free nor independent. It is controlled by the ruling elite. It follows, therefore, that the ruling elite have instructed the editors of mainstream media, be it broadcast media or print media, to project Burnham as being different to Starmer, as someone who loves the British people, who wants to help the British people. But of course, all of that is a facade. And anyone at this juncture who falls for that is either ideologically brainwashed or is a born fool.
Strong words. And you've always been consistent about your general dislike of the ruling elites. Why is it then that people who are comparatively wealthy have signed 120 of them apparently, including Gary Lineker, who's never really impressed me, to be honest with you. They've actually signed this odd plea, which some would say it's just virtue signalling, stating, please tax us more. Here's one of the headlines. Gary Lineker begs Burnham, tax millionaires like me more. Former president is one of 120 signatories of open letter mocked by Reform UK's virtue signalling. Why are they saying this? If you're right, are people like Gary Lineker either just trying to look better, have they been fooled? Or do they somehow genuinely follow the Andy Burnham mantras?
The ruling elite's useful idiots are not just comprised of politicians and journalists. No, they are comprised of, for example, celebrities. That is why, for example, when the ruling elite require their celebrities to endorse one of their policies, for example, lockdowns and the so-called vaccines, they wheel them out. So look what happened during the aforementioned lockdown period in Britain. Celebrity after celebrity after celebrity was wheeled out, put on mainstream media, calling on Britons to stay at home, to protect themselves, to protect their families, to protect the NHS, and then to take the so-called vaccine, how can it be that virtually each and every celebrity was of the same opinion regarding the so-called COVID-19 virus, the so-called COVID-19 pandemic? How can it be? There are many other areas that I can cite as well, many other areas. So again, useful idiots are comprised of more than just politicians and journalists. So all that we see before us is an illusion, and the ruling elite are masters of illusion. They are masters of disinformation. So they will wheel out famous people as a way of maintaining the illusion that Britain is a democracy, that Burnham is truly in charge. Have a look at these people who have signed this petition calling on Burnham to do this and to do that, and carry out your own research into them. See what they have also endorsed. So, for example, Gary Lineker is a fervent supporter of immigration and a fervent supporter of multiculturalism. Well, we all know that the British state or the British ruling elite is imposing immigration and multiculturalism on the British people. And there you have Gary Lineker, a fervent supporter. I can go on and on inciting other people. So again, the British ruling elite is a master of illusion, and no one should fall for it. None of these people who you see on television are our allies, are our friends. They're not on our side. That is why they're in those positions. And as you comment on Gary Lineker, well, I believe he was always an overrated footballer. And then all of a sudden in 1991, he's given his own show. I can't recall now the name of that show, but it was a weekday show concerning football. And I remember at the time, and I was only a very young teenager, asking, how can it be that someone who was overrated as a footballer now has his own show? And then within a short period of time, he's given the job of presenting Match of the Day. And I say to people, draw your own conclusions on that.
Well, he was also, I think, the highest paid person in the BBC, even though, interestingly enough, and this is pretty much, in my view, as close to fact as you can get, he was able to express his political views. Well, the more junior people in the BBC got told off for doing exactly the same thing. Now, my mask slipped a little bit because there was a joke about early prisoner release, and that there it is. Burnham rebuked ministers after prisoner releases joke. I have to say I find West treating a wholly uncredible minister. But they were making some joke, and you could say, okay, it was sort of behind closed doors, but happened to be picked up by a microphone. And he said, oh, well, you're just going to let them all out early. Your opinion about what you call the ruling elite would presumably include the cabinet. Are we wrong to take a rather hard-nosed attitude towards jokes about early prisoner release? Should we say, well, they were just having an ironic joke behind closed doors, we just happened to hear it? Well,
it wasn't behind closed doors, was it?
Well, obviously not, we wouldn't know it otherwise.
Right, they didn't realise the microphone is on, which raises something else. Can you imagine what they are saying behind closed doors? Can you imagine the jokes they are making at the expense of the British people behind closed doors? That so-called joke was disgusting. In what normal country would politicians joke about criminals being released early, including criminals who are serving time in prison for rape and for example, killing a police officer. What normal country would that happen in? That partly tells you that the likes of Streeting and the rest are useful idiots. They simply serve the ruling elite. In a normal country, simply because of that so-called joke, they would have been sacked. Why is it funny to laugh at rapists being released early from prison? Why would you laugh about that? That's not a laughing matter. That is a deadly serious matter. And yet they find it funny. Well, their day perhaps will come when the British people rise up and say enough is enough. And as a Christian, I will say this: their day will certainly come when they go before God, because then all the money in the world which they have been given by the ruling elite will not protect them.
The Labour Party is obviously fairly desperate to try and put the recent past behind it. Is there anything Andy Burnham could do to instill faith in you, Marcus?
How can the Labour Party be trying to put the past behind them when Burnham has appointed 2 people to 2 senior positions in 10 Downing Street who were from Hope Not Hate? Hope Not Hate is a bitter enemy of Britain and the British people. A terrible, terrible enemy. And yet Burnham has appointed 2 people from Hope Not Hate to senior positions within 10 Downing Street.
Who are those?
I can't recall their names off the top of my head. One is a woman and one is a man. All anyone needs to do is do a simple internet search: Andy Burnham, Hope Not Hate, Downing Street jobs, and their names will come up. So the Labour Party, which is controlled by the ruling elite, as is the Conservative Party, is doing nothing of the sort. Burnham has brought back into government Angela Rayner. What skills, what competence does Angela Rayner have? 0. And yet she's been brought back into government. Look at the people he's given, on paper, key roles to. John Healey, Chancellor of the Exchequer. John Healey has no background in economics. Indeed, when he was Defence Secretary, he was given that job in spite of him having no background in the military. 0. None of these people have any backgrounds for the jobs that they have. What does that tell you? They're not making policy. They're not deciding policy. It's as simple as that. Be it the new Defence Secretary or the new Foreign Secretary, no one should think that they are deciding policy. It's like this, Lembit. If you were to appoint me to an economic position, how would I be able to decide policy when I have no background in economics, when economics is not my specialism? Indeed, economics, whilst I have a basic knowledge of it, I could never speak with authority about economics. That is why, from time to time, when I receive requests from television channels to speak about an economic matter, I say to them, I can give an overview, I can give my own opinion, but I am not an authority on economics like I am an authority on foreign policy or international relations. So how could I ever be given the job of, for example, Chancellor of the Exchequer, when I have no competence, I have no when that is not my specialism? That tells you that if I was given the job of Chancellor of the Exchequer, I would not be deciding policy. It would be others in the department, in the Treasury, who would be deciding policy. And I would simply be the implementer. I would simply be a mouthpiece. The real person who is deciding policy is the permanent undersecretary in the Treasury. That person will tell the Chancellor, this is what the policy is. This is how we're going to achieve it. This is how you will implement it. This is what you will say. And thankfully, Lembit, after all this time, many people in Britain, including many high-profile people, have now come to realize that ministers do not decide policy. It is the senior civil servants in a department, such as the permanent undersecretary, who decides that. Once again, how can John Healey be Chancellor of the Exchequer, i.e. be in charge of the economy, when he has no background in economics? If anyone can answer that, if anyone can sincerely make a case for John Healey being Chancellor of the Exchequer, then I will eat my hat. But the reality is that there is no case to be made.
So overall, the adulation to conclude that new PM Andy Burnham has got a promised education change to get young people into work and stuff. You think that all of this is essentially just window dressing? That, to quote a song by the band The Who, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Now, parting on the left is just a parting on the right. You don't think anything's going to change?
Isn't it interesting how in every single Western country, from Britain to America to Canada to France to Germany to Australia and so on, the same slogans are spoken by politicians. Andy Burnham has said he wants to build a fairer Britain for all. What a banal comment. What a meaningless comment. It is no different to saying, children are the future. It means nothing. We've heard things from America such as build back better. Well, yes, we all want a better society. But isn't it interesting, Lembit, how Burnham, the new principal puppet, the new chief useful idiots of the British ruling elite, they all say things without specifying exactly what they're going to do, and specifying how they're going to be different to their predecessors. And how telling it is that mainstream journalists in, for example, Britain, never ask specific questions about specific policies. So, for example, if Britain had an independent and free media, Burnham would have been asked these questions by journalists. Will you halt illegal immigration? Yes or no? Will you arrest and deport each and every illegal immigrant? Yes or no? Will you repeal the law allowing abortion at any stage before birth? Yes or no? Will you sanction leading Israeli politicians for Israel's murderous conduct in Gaza? Yes or no? There are other questions which could be asked. But how telling it is, Lembit, that no such question, or none of those questions, were ever put to Burnham. None of them whatsoever. That is why I tell you here and now, whilst he will say certain things, it will be business as usual. There will be no difference. Again, if he wants to truly save the British taxpayer money, instead of knocking a few pence off bus fares, how about stopping £1 billion each month for illegal immigrants and other foreign nationals? How about that? But he won't. He won't do that because he's a puppet.
I can tell your rage. Thank you. That's Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, who really regards Andy Burnham as part of the ruling elite. Before we finish, I just want to add two things. The first one is please like and subscribe to @Unprecedented TV. It costs you nothing, it takes a few seconds, and it helps us a huge amount. And secondly, I want Andy Burnham to succeed. If Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos is wrong, perhaps this will be a new dawn. If, on the other hand, if Marcus is right, then we have swapped bosses of the government. Remember, there are servants, but bosses of the government, but nothing else will change. I think Andy Burnham's got about 6 months to prove that he is genuinely better than Keir Starmer. I think he'll get a lift in the polls. I think Labour will be #1 in the polling in a couple of months' time. But perhaps if Andy Burnham lets everyone down, then the crash and the burn will be even worse than it was for Keir Starmer. Do let me know what you think. Do follow me on Twitter @Lembit Opik, and follow us @Unprecedented TV. For now, though, thanks very much for watching. Thanks to the team, and thanks to Marcus Papadopoulos, the man who hopefully personifies what we're here to do. Tell it like it is, and if Unprecedented TV ran the country, things would definitely be better. See you soon.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.